Fáilte Harnás go dtí FleadhFest an Chláir, coming to you once again from Comhaltas, the Comhaltas Regional Resource Centre here in Ennis, County Clare. Fleadh Cheoil is the world's largest celebration of Irish music, song and dance. Attracting hundreds and thousands of visitors from all over Ireland and the world, the Fleadh is now a treasured national institution. Following the first festival in Mullingar in 1951, the reputation of the Fleadh grew each year as it moved from town to town. By the time it came to Ennis in 1956, huge crowds attended the three-day event. Among them was a young singer from Spansel Hill, just outside the town, who was so impressed by what he witnessed that he had to write it all down in a song. Here is Robbie McMahon sitting by the range in Duggan's Bar in Spansel Hill, singing his own composition, The Fleadh Down in Ennis. Taken from a film about Robbie's life produced by the Comhaltas Archive, the piece also features contributions by Paula Carroll, Seamus McMahuna, Lauras O'Murchu and Gary McMahon.
Well, the Fleadh Ennis is an epic. It's an epic, one of the first ones that were ever made. And he had brought everyone and he has immortalised all those people in song. And he has done it in a wonderfully poetic, lyrical and musical fashion.
Will you sit back a while till I sing you a song? It's not very short or it's not very long. It's about the Fleadh Cheoil down in Ennis, you see. So to me will you pay your attention?
The Fleadh down in Ennis commemorates the 1956 All-Ireland Fleadh, which was held in Ennis. Comhaltas had just been formed in the early 1950s, and by the time 1956 came, musicians had been really getting a sense of themselves and a sense of confidence and pride back in their own music.
They came down from Dublin so hearty and gay. They brought Leo Rosum to show them the way. Himself and Sean Seary, they played all the way with the flute player Vincent Dobradrick.
He mentions all the great names. He has a way of describing them, and you can almost see them in the setting at the Fleadh in Ennis. You can imagine the session of music on the streets. You actually feel part of it 50 years later. That's a unique achievement, first of all, to write the song and then be able to transmit it to an audience in a way that makes it relevant to everyone who's actually there and listening.
We had it first on Ciarán McMahona's programme, and Robbie had recorded it, and it was a great novelty, and it was great fun too, and the whole thing was new as well, you see.
And Johnny McMahon, he played in encore, and the Bold and the Canes, who they played as much more, and the finish he played Colonel Fraser. Skidry idle dum didry dum didry diddy.
It's great to think that all these years after that Fleadh, that people are still singing that song and not just Bobby himself.
Young fellas now, people who never met Leo Rowsome or Dennis Murphy, they all feel, people have responded and continue to respond. That's a great song. Who wrote it? Robbie McMahon. Got it. I'll have to, I know him, I've heard about him. He's at the Fleadh. Go down, you'll find him in wherever the singing pub is, Everybody got their four lines, and whether it was Chris Stoney coming down from Belharbour and he playing at the small concertina, or indeed Mrs. Crotty.
Mrs. Crotty, she came all the way from Kilrush. She took a high note for the bud on the bush. She played all the day and she never did blush. 'Twas good gather yourself, Mrs. Crotty. Now Peter O'Loughlin from Connolly came. He brought Paddy Murphy, so it was all in the game. They played the Jewish and they made a big name for the one at the Fleadh down in Ennis. And down from Belharbour, Kistroney he came. He played on a matchbox, I thought it was that same. Till someone said, Robbie, what's that you were saying? Isn't that his own small concertina? Skidry idle dum didry dum didry diddy.
He has framed a picture of that Fleadh in Ennis, which will remain forever in anybody's mind who lived through those times.
So we know he's the king of the pipers. And someone said then, who's that man over there? Isn't that Jimmy Ward from the north side of Clare? He plays on the banjo with music to spare, for he plays with the great Kilfenora. Our own Paddy Kenny, he took all the fair. He played through the streets and right up to the square. Said, Daniel O'Connell, my life on you there, and I think you're the best of them all, sure. And all from America, more of them flew. And Paddy O'Brien, he was one of the few. He played on the accordion, you'd swear there were two. He got so many notes in together.
There isn't a line of the Fleadh down in Ennis, but holds. You know, it's integrity, its sense of joy and wonderment, and hilarity, and fun, and devilment.
It's all over now, but 'twas something to see. So thanks to Sean Reid and the great committee. So I wish you good health now and good luck from me until we all meet in Donegal. Skidry idle dum didry dum didry day.
And no matter how many times you hear the song, Robbie will always succeed in making it new.
Did I look good?
Since the Fleadh down in Ennis in 1956, the festival has gone from strength to strength and was held in Ennis again in 1977, 2016 and 2017. 2016 saw the centenary of the Easter Rising, and as part of Fleadh Cheoil in Ennis that year, a special musical pageant was held at Cusack Park called Seachtar Fear, Seacht Law. It was a restaging of a work by renowned author Brian McMahon, first performed at Croke Park in 1966. The pageant retold the Rising through the stories of the 7 signatories of the proclamation and was attended by over 2,000 people, among them Uachtarán na hÉireann, Michael D. Higgins. In 2013, the Comhaltas Archive were asked by Comhaltas to create an exhibition detailing the history of Fleadh Cheoil. As part of the project, a short documentary film was also produced telling the story so far of this extraordinary festival.
Fleadh Cheoil is one of the biggest festivals of traditional arts in the world. For 1 week each August, the very best of traditional talent from all over Ireland and the world gather together to meet, to compete, but most importantly to celebrate all that is best in Irish music, song and dance. For the host town or city, the All-Ireland Fleadh means a joyful invasion of thousands of musicians and listeners, young and old, whole families and curious tourists, all drawn by the magic that the Fleadh promises and never fails to deliver. From the modest weekend festival that was the first Fleadh in the early 1950s, Comhaltas Units now presides over an event that has grown in stature and status down through the decades, currently drawing over 250,000 visitors throughout a week-long celebration of the best of Irish traditional culture. In early 1951, a group from the Pipers Club in Dublin travelled to Mullingar to meet with some traditional music enthusiasts from County Westmeath, where it was decided to set up an organisation to represent all Irish traditional musicians and to organise a great annual festival of Irish traditional music, song and dance. From this initial meeting, the organisation that was to become known as Comhaltas Units would grow. Although they could not know it at the time, this small group of visionaries had sown the seed for the phenomenon that would become Fleadh Cheoil.
The Fleadh Cheoil, in a lot of ways, was the watershed in the history of Irish traditional music, because here you had musicians not just from every corner of Ireland but from abroad as well, meeting each other perhaps for the first time, gaining confidence, seeing the numbers and the standards of music and learning tunes, and then going from there on to the next Fleadh Cheoil, building up friendships and that. So really the Fleadh Cheoil and Comhaltas were synonymous with each other. And I can always recall, which is probably a social commentary, I can recall going to Fleadh Cheoil in Clónas, and accommodation of course would be an issue. And I remember staying in the courthouse there, where they had brought in the little army beds, and you hired your bed for the weekend for 10 shillings, but it didn't matter, because for a young person the Fleadh was so exciting, there was so much happening. You weren't really concerned perhaps with the niceties of survival in terms of food and so on. And I think the social side as well as the cultural side made a huge impact on a young generation, and for many reasons that is why the young generation identified with the music. Obviously, it had its own intrinsic value, but the music, the singing, the dancing, all of that were very, very exciting times for these young people.
Such was the popularity of the Fleadh that within a few short years this annual gathering had grown to become a great national festival, attended by traditional musicians, singers and dancers from all parts of Ireland and overseas. Nowhere was this more evident than Ennis in 1956.
I would say definitely, in my memory anyway, that was definitely the most fantastic of all the Fleadhs. But it was at that time it was a great location to have a Fleadh. It was right in the centre of the good music that was in Chláir and South Galway and East Galway and of course Kerry.
The Fleadh was a completely new thing at that stage, and it was this wonderful thing that was happening for everyone. And because like when the people turned out and you saw famous men and women walking up and down the street with their fiddles, as someone said, they're talking about some, I can't remember who it was, you know, he said, and you saw, let's say, Dennis Murphy. He says, well, tell her the truth, he said, he carried his own fiddle down the street just like any ordinary man.
I met people for the first time, you know, that I hadn't met the year before. Many people, like Robbie McMahon. That was the first time I ever met him. Paddy O'Brien came home from America. That was very exciting at the time because Paddy was a fantastic box player. He was the real father of the BNC, we say, and he was home, and a lot of people that I hadn't ever seen before were at that Fleadh, and I think it might have been, I certainly met Kieran McMahon there, and we had been all listening to Kieran's programmes, you see, on radio, and it was amazing to meet all the people that were connected with the kind of thing that we liked, you know.
It's hard now to explain to young people, like, what it meant. But like, it was like, nearly like the creation, like God, God waved his hand and all the musicians arrived, like, and I suppose there is that thing about the musicians that people will stop and meet in the street, and at that stage, anyway, you know, after a few words, will we play a few old tunes? Ah, we will. Sit down, you know. That was happening so much, and that was one of the big things, the lovely things of the early years.
From start to finish of Fleadh Cheoil was all surprises and all excitement. You'd meet people and be introduced to people. I remember the thing well, like from that reason, because I loved that part of it myself, meeting people. And I remember meeting Leo Rowsome, you know, and Kathleen Harrington, and Mrs. Crotty of Chláir.
Before you had an opportunity to come out and display the music at a Fleadh Cheoil, and I suppose at the Oireachtas na Gaeilge as well, it was largely played in the homes by the fireside. The visitors, all right, or the neighbours would come in, or a visiting musician would come in and join them as well in the home, but it really wasn't out on the big stage at that particular time. But what was important, I think, was that if those musicians at that time had not been playing it, and young people perhaps coming into the home and taking an interest in seeing somebody playing a pipes or a fiddle or accordion or a flute and probably taking an interest, that was the nursery at that time. The seed was being sown, and then there was the opportunity at a later stage to take that forward in a manner in which has happened since. But we do owe a great debt of gratitude to those people. And when the Fleadh started and they came to the big event, they were being acknowledged and recognised for the work they had done, for the excellence, for the creativity which they had had within their own community. And now they were coming out to share this with the bigger world.
In the 1960s, the Fleadh began to attract more and more young people. When it returned to Mullingar in 1963, the crowds exceeded all expectations.
The weather was unbelievable. It was like Mediterranean weather at the time. That weekend, it was Whish weekend, the Fleadhs used to be held at those years. And I remember the whole of the music room in our house was over with the shop, and it was just over the shop. And windows were open and people were, I mean, there must have been 100 people in the room. If there could be, there were. It was like a tin of John West sardines that were packed into it. And with people sitting, like if they leaned back, that they're falling out onto the street, sort of. But there was one, I remember my mother going over to the window one day, and there was thousands of people down the town, walking down. And one man held up, he took his wallet out of his back pocket, and he held it up like that, and he said to me, "Mother, I'll give you that if you let me in to the music." And he could hear it, you see, from the floor was going up and down, you know. And it was, I remember Martin Burns was there. Sean O'Connor, Sean Ryan was in it. Sean O'Shea Khan was in it. The crowd from Birmingham, Mrs. Laurie and all her family were in it. It was just magic, absolute magic, so it was.
The 1960s would see crowds throng to Fleadh in Clones, Thurles, Boyle, Enniscorthy and Cashel, and in 1970 it was held for the first time in Listowel, a town that would become synonymous with the festival, hosting it on no less than 14 occasions over the years.
Listowel was, as a town, probably was the ultimate place for a Fleadh Cheoil. There's no question about it. It was like the Fleadh was at home when you were there, and just it had to do with the people, I think, more than anything else, that whole friendly nature of people inviting you in. I remember passing I was going to say a barber shop, but a hairdressing shop at about 2 o'clock in the morning, going home from a session one night and falling with the hunger, of course, and the hairdressers was open, like, and they were selling oxtail soup and sandwiches, you know. So that was, you know, the beauty of Listowel was all of that. You were welcomed into pubs, you were welcomed into houses, we played a bit of music, you were always welcome. It was a fantastic welcome for musicians.
In 1975, Fleadh Cheoil na hÉireann left Listowel and moved north to Buncrana in Donegal for the 1975 and 1976 festivals. Some had expressed misgivings about the location due to its proximity to the border, but these fears proved unfounded as thousands thronged to the small Donegal town from both sides of the border to enjoy the best that traditional Irish culture had to offer.
John, what is your reaction to the Fleadh so far?
It's a fantastic success. It's far, far better than anything we could have ever thought about. It's, the town is completely and utterly jammed. A town all spread out. Every street is just black with people. Everybody's happy. There's plenty of music, and that's it.
That's good. Well, tell me now, all the arrangements that you made for the Fleadh Cheoil, did you get good cooperation from the people of the town?
Definitely. Everybody in the town responded 100%. Anything we asked for or wanted, we got. And I think this is evident by thousands and thousands of strangers. It's evident to them that no effort was spared to try and make them comfortable and happy.
The scare about the security problem that put some people off, had this any founding at all?
None in the wide earthly world. We couldn't accept, but then again, we live here. We know what it's like. And we treated the thing away back early on. We treated it as a colossal joke. But I suppose that there might be a possibility of people further south, through the media, that people further south might believe this. But this is one of the most peaceful towns in Ireland.
Conas tá gairí leat ag an Fleadh Cheoil, ruirt baint tanmhas.
Tá baint tanmh ar fadas agus téan obair an coistin seo I bhaimar an gomór. Tá harbh sásta leis an mion olbhacán atá déanta agus tá sé sileag bud tora ar a séthar.
An bhfuil tú sásta gur dlachar ag an ard cóla gur an Fleadh Cheoil a thuirt de Buntchrana Ennis.
Tá Milan tásta mar go mór mhór tuis gur thug sé seans de bhaintear ortha a bhaine leis an geol tradiisiúnta teachta na slúite chuig an Fleadh Cheoil agus tá sé sileag go mar a sin a bhí sé.
Agus bhfuil tú sásta ó thaobh tinrimh na daoine.
Tá an áras is cumlam dá riara faoin slúte na sráidine mar is rud anbheag ar fada sin ach tá mé harbh sásta leis na slúte tá ag freistal ar na Comhaltas tá na Halíláin agus na Comhaltas Cheoil agus na céalathe agus sin an rud is táachtaí.
In 1977, the Fleadh moved south again as Ennis, capital of County Clare, played host to the biggest Fleadh yet.
Nothing could explain the density of people that we experienced in the streets of Ennis back when the Fleadh Cheoil was here. Because you had to elbow your way up and down the town, and every bar was packed, and there were people standing outside. There was music outside it, inside it. There was music in the square. There was music everywhere, and it was just like a sea of people. And every time you turned your head, you'd leave the sound of one session, you'd begin to hear the next one, And there were every kind of form, there was like there would be a whole bunch of what I call these kind of 1970s Palo soprani heroes, there was a particular brand of accordion playing that was very popular at that time,
The Fleadh in Ennis, we had been used to the Fleadh Nua, which was a gentler affair altogether, but very comfortable, very much family orientated. And okay, there was a pub scene, I suppose, around, but there were lots of concerts and the Liverpool Ceilidh band coming over and playing outside the church at 2 or 3 in the morning, and us joining in the sessions. That continued into the All Ireland Fleadh, but the numbers that arrived in Ennis in '77 were just phenomenal, and we never expected anything like that in Ennis. Fantastic for me. I was a 20-year-old at the time, so this was it. The old ground, I remember the gates closed at one side, so the entire grounds outside the old ground itself were different sessions going on here, there and everywhere. Ben Lennon was there with Charlie Lennon, and we'd meet up with these heroes of traditional music, and to be allowed to play with them, it was just fantastic.
Throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the popularity of Irish traditional music continued to grow, and with it, attendance at the Fleadh. And while many young people came to simply enjoy themselves and to savour this living, vibrant expression of their own culture, others came to play, to compete, but especially to learn from the masters of the tradition at the Scoil Éigse.
The Scoil Éigse is a great kind of nurturing ground for young musicians just prior to the Fleadh, and that runs for a week, and I'm amazed that you might get 500, 600, 700 students at that Scoil Éigse being taught by some of the great musicians that are doing the rounds, and they have this get together for the week where there's a series of classes, and then there's concerts with the musicians, and they can join the musicians in in sessions, all these students have this kind of open access to the top class musicians of the time, and I think that's a very, very important aspect of the Fleadh, even though it's like the week before the Fleadh, but it builds up to that weekend. And it culminates in a big concert which starts at 10 o'clock in the morning with all these tutors, and that never ceases to amaze me that they're up at 10 in the morning playing at a concert from 10 until 1. Then the Chláir is just nicely put to one side and people kind of take a deep breath and head into the weekend of the Fleadh. I just think it's a magical time that Chláir cross over into the Fleadh itself. That access that young people have to these famous musicians that are doing the rounds, and they can be with them, they can be playing with them, they can be learning from them during the week and take that into the weekend. That's real magic.
The magic of the Fleadh is hard to define. Its unique energy and atmosphere may have to be experienced to be fully understood. But for anyone who has attended Fleadh Cheoil over the years, it has left an impression that will live long in their memory.
And it was like sheer heaven. It was a liberation, in capitals, of anyone with an interest in traditional music.
The Fleadh Cheoil was an opening to a very wide gathering of young musicians from all over the place. So you felt your community and your sense of belonging was greatly expanded.
I remember walking up the street at one particular Fleadh, and I was only just learning the pipes at the time, and I was walking up the street with the case, and let's be honest now, there were two legends, and they still are two legends, were standing out, and they spotted me with the pipe case, and they dragged me in for a tune with them, and that was John King and Tony Cullen, and you couldn't meet better men, two real troubadours, and I'll never forget that as long as I live. Actually, the fact that they brought me in, I was only a child.
I felt like it's old, and I'm 73, and I still see. The great thing is there are young people still playing and going kind of crazy or cracked like we did in our time, but they have that love for the music.